evening. Diane, could you recognize any city officials who are in attendance?
Yes, sir. Mayor Jamie Slutz.
Here.
Safety Service Director Renee Baker.
Here.
Chief Counsel Earl Wise.
Here.
Director of Development Ted Unking.
Here.
Income Tax Budget Director Lori Katagides Moron.
Here.
Is there anyone from administration I missed? That's it, President Pro Tem.
Thank you, Diane. And let the record reflect that everyone is here, all members of council are here except for Councilwoman Creamer, and she may be a little bit late today, as well as President Mike Slater. Due to the fact that Mrs. Creamer is absent at the moment, we're going to go ahead and move community development to the end this evening. We'll start with economic development. Councilman Ray.
Have nothing.
And then on to health, welfare, and building regulations. Councilwoman Cunningham.
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. On to parks and rec. Councilwoman Harvick Smith.
I have nothing for Parks and Recs this evening.
Thank you. Let's go to police and fire. And we do have one piece of legislation. This is from Chief Hack. Please prepare an ordinance to authorize the Director of Public Service and Safety to advertise for and receive sealed bids and enter into contract with the lowest and best bidder upon approval of the Board of Control for the Fire Station Number 4 addition project. The cost is not to exceed $228,200. This was discussed with us back in November. Chief Hack addressed council on this. This is to increase the size of their storage. It also gives them a place for their fitness center, which is in the apparatus floor right now on an unlevel portion. And I believe he told me that it was to also extend the apparatus floor to be able to fit larger vehicles in there. Are there any questions about this evening? The funding is coming from the ARPA funds, by the way. Are there any questions? Mr. Lewis.
Refresh my memory, was the funding from ARPA already approved in the previous allocations?
I believe it is. If we could have the Safety Service Director come up, perhaps she could answer that question.
Good evening. So to address your question, because I did just double check with Lori, it was, but I also wanted to let you know that for this addition to Fire Station 4, it also helps for them to be able to store their turnout gear, because that needs to be kept separate, and right now it's not. So to be in with code, it needs to be kept separate, so this will allow them to keep that turnout gear separate from other gear and around the vehicles.
Thank you for that clarification. Did that answer your question, Mr. Lewis? Okay. Are there any other questions about this? Okay, I'll be advancing this to the agenda then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to public utilities and environmental. Councilwoman Booth.
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Rules, courts, and civil service, Councilman Gray.
Nothing for rules, courts, and civil service this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Streets, highways, and traffic safety, Councilman Sneak.
Nothing from streets, highways, and traffic safety. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, finance, Councilman Lewis.
Yes, the first piece we have here is please prepare an ordinance to appropriate from the unappropriated balance of 1401 Capital Improvement Fund, specifically 1401-3055-2529, lease purchase transport van $71,000. And this is to release the established funds purchasing or outfitting of a transport van for the police department. If my memory recalls, and I don't know if there's anybody in the administration that can verify this, but we receive funding when we transport back and forth from the jail and the court, and that funding is what is funding this upgrade. And I'm getting nods in the back, instead of saying I'm accurate. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So it's essentially self-funding it itself. But that we can put on the agenda for next week. The next piece we have here is please prepare legislation authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Massillon, Ohio to enter into a one-year contract between the Board of Commissioners in Stark County, Ohio, City of Massillon for the housing of the City of Massillon, Ohio codified ordinance prisoners at the Stark County Jail and declaring an emergency. Are there any questions about this for discussion this evening? Essentially, it's just us paying our share when one of our inmates being held at the county jail. And then I have one additional discussion point tonight that I wanted to get going. It's a little bit of housekeeping. Some good news is that the administration did move on bringing 2 code enforcement officers forward. I believe one of them is already with us, another one will be joining us soon, if I understand correctly. Both of them are with us already? All right, both of them are with us already. Sorry. But we just need to make, and I'll try and need Lori's assistance on this, so you might as well come on up. Yeah. For the funding of it, because from what I understand, we had some savings in one area, and that is the finances that they want to use. But we have to reallocate that funding from what it was originally for, so that they can use it for this purchase. And I don't know if you want to discuss a little bit about the savings, where it's coming from, and
well, I didn't bring that with me because I did not anticipate that question.
okay.
But it is a savings from one of the projects that we were going to do for the sewer projects. And so we were able to cut some of the funds that we needed for that, and so it gave us a little bit of a fluctuating number, and those are the funds that will be used for code enforcement.
And those were the ARPA funds?
Yes, yes.
So, since we don't have it drafted up today, 150,000,
Approximately, yes.
that will get us there.
Yes.
Okay. So $150,000 effective March 1st would be the appropriation that I'll be getting onto the agenda for Monday for us to vote on, and that'll cover salary benefits and whatnot for those 2 positions.
Yes, and I can tell you exactly what, I have to look at the project list to tell you what projects we actually save money on.
I think what will be more important for Diane, what Diane will need to know is what account it's coming from and what account it needs to go to.
Okay.
Or how we need it.
Okay.
My statements and how we
Didn't know it would not, but I could cover both of those,
Okay.
so.
You have any questions? That's all. Right.
Thank you, Councilman Lewis. Then we'll move to community development, and since Mrs. Creamer isn't here, Councilman Gray will be taking that committee tonight.
Thank you, Councilman Lombardi. Yes, Mrs. Creamer asked me to step in. She was anticipating being late or not being able to make it to the meeting at all. So there are no new items to discuss. There are 2 existing items from last week to discuss. First one is ordinance number 28-2024. Ordinance to accept the dedication of road right-of-way easements for Canyon Creek Estates, Phase 4 subdivision in Massillon, Ohio. I know this was already on the agenda for the last week and received first reading. Are there any additional questions, concerns, thoughts, any comments community development wants to make? Seeing none, this was already on the agenda, so this will be up for second reading on Monday. next item is ordinance number 29-2024, ordinance to accept the replat and vacation dedication of easements for Whitetail Creek Development, Massillon, Ohio, and it's under declaring an emergency. Again, this was on the agenda last week, received first reading. I understand Mr. Hermking would like to come up and address the council on this item, so if you would like to come forward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. We have several folks in attendance this evening. From First Energy, Mark Youngman, Account Manager, and Amy Hopkins, External Affairs, who spoke to you a week or so ago. From SBM Architecture is Kevin Noble. From Bitdeer, Paul Hansen, the Project Manager, Andre Lenardowitz in Public Relations, and Robert Pena, who is the Economic Development Consultant. They wanted to come this evening, continue the dialogue, and answer any questions in those areas that may still be out there, or that have come up over the last week or so. I know they have followed our meetings, and I think there are some things they'd like to address from some of the things they've seen and heard. So I'd like to call Mr. Hansen up from Bitdeer to start that part of the meeting.
Yeah, Mr. Hansen.
Good evening, council members, and thank you for having us again. I know that over the last several weeks, we've had discussions about our project and our intentions here within Massillon. We are excited at the prospect of building a long-term relationship with the people of Massillon and the surrounding communities. The emerging economy here offers incredible potential for growth and economic expansion and true partnership that we believe presents a great place to accomplish these. We've already had an introduction by Ted of everyone that's here to speak on our behalf. But first of all, I wanted to address a few of the items that have been spoken and circulated within the community and that are factually incorrect. We look forward to being honest and respectful in conversation and about these plans this evening and in the months to come, all laying the foundations for great collaboration with the city. We will have some discussions on the site development that I will have Kevin speaking on with SBM, and also some power concerns that we will have First Energy speaking on our behalf. Some of the previous meetings that have been brought forward, we've reviewed with our headquarters team as well as our Singapore's headquarters team, and we found things that were being circulated that are incorrect, and so we would like to clarify some of the conversations. Number one, first item I'd like to address is that cryptocurrency was thrown out of China because of environmental concerns. This is not true. The Chinese government threw cryptocurrency out due to the fact that they are a centralized government and they try to control every facet of the economy. They did not like that our industry is decentralized and they could not get their hands on it and regulate it and control it. That's why they shut it down. They couldn't take that from us. So that's our first thing we wanted to bring forward. Secondly, with the building and the cooling, our intentions on this site is to build the most energy efficient, noise reducing, heat exhaustive buildings that are out there. We've engaged local talent and we sent out requests for proposals, and we've got 7 bids in as of last Friday. So when we do pick the structural design firm that we're working with, our 2 main points is that we want to work on heat abatement and noise abatement. So this is a ground-up build. So we will do everything in our power to make these the most efficient, noise-reduced buildings possible. And that's our number one intent on building those. Also, with the cooling on the buildings, there's lots of videos out there. There's lots of people that, or industry people that have, there's been bad situations in this industry. We don't have that same footprint as other people. Our other buildings have been retrofit. This is unique to us. This is our opportunity to do it right, going from the ground up, starting. So our full intention is to invest in doing that. So with that, some of the buildings that you can find online, they're very, very, very noisy, and you hear loud, large fans. Our intentions are, with the fan systems that are on the machines themselves, is to use those as our primary cooling. Also, we use what we call an evaporative wall. So one side of the buildings will be completely not shelled in, but it will have a water wall like a radiator. It's a fibrous material that you run a spray bar across, and water drips through it. It's not like flowing water, it just kind of saturates it. And the fans on the equipment will suck that cooling air through. And then any of the water that doesn't evaporate off and go through the machines to cool them down will get recovered and sent back to our holding tanks, cleaned, and then reused and circulated. So that's how we cool our systems on a standard mining machine. Okay, so then we can real quick talk about the noise abatement. Yes, these machines make noise, and yes, this is a 24-hour-a-day, 7 days a week piece of equipment. Some of the items that we've talked about previously is that we plan on installing a 10-foot wall along the western side where the residents are closest to us. Once the completion of the building and all of the equipment has been installed, we plan on coming back and reinstalling whatever is the best option for us to do noise abatement, whether we do another soundproofing wall or whatever it is. We'll plant vegetation, we'll plant trees, we'll do everything that we can for area beautification to not make it look like a massive, just building complex, but with the intent of being very heavy on the western side. All the other noise is, over half of the noise will be deflected towards the east. The way that the machines work is that you'll have hot flowing on hot and cold going into cold, because if you blow hot air into the equipment, then the equipment overheats. So our intention is to do everything that we can to minimize the noise and the heat effects that we have with our systems. So that being said, we've done autometric testing at our largest facility in Rockdale, Texas. We did this on Tuesday or Wednesday last week. And at 400 feet away from our largest line, which is approximately 24 racks high, 6 machines across, which is 144 machines on one rack system. The site that we're building here, the intention is to build 108 machines on one rack system, so reducing it by about 40% of the amount of equipment that's there. When we were 400 feet away, which is approximately the closest resident, we reduced the noise without any obstructions at about 40 decibels from what it is directly in front of the machines. So, I mean, that was a good result in what we expected. We're doing other manners to try to reduce that by putting the warehouse in front of it and also the fencing and then whatever afterwards that we have to do to try to minimize that. So with the threshold of 75 decibels that we have to meet with that, once we leave the property line, I feel very, very confident that we'll be far below that decibel standard that's for the industrial complex. Some other issues that we'd like to discuss is the health effects of the electricity and the environment that we have. Our site is a non-pollutant. We use electricity. We don't generate any kind of pollutants other than you have noise. That, I guess you can call that a pollutant. But as far as environmentally, to the grounds, to any of that, we don't use oils, we don't use anything that's going to contaminate the area. We're a non-polluter, as we're specified. Okay, in addition, one of the statements that was made was that we will not be contributing to the local economy because we're based abroad and sending all of our money back to Singapore or to China. Our corporate headquarters is in Singapore. However, we have a U.S. headquarters in San Jose. With the build-out of the 2 sites that we plan on building here in Ohio, that will make 5 sites in the U.S., which will be the largest portion of the company's mining sites, will be U.S. bound. Our assets are U.S. listed assets. We are a NASDAQ-traded company and subject to many governance regulations scrutiny from the SEC and other governmental regulations. We have to comply and report to them accordingly. So to infer that our company is a China-based company is not true at all. And we, are in, when we came in, we said we want to engage local talent. We want to build locally. We want to provide economy for local. As I've stated, we're working with SBM. They're out of Akron. To us, that's local. We are civil currently. We've gone through our civil development plan, and we're in negotiations for our civil contractor to be able to clear the land and prep the site with all the utilities. Very local. 5 out of the 7 bidders that we had for our building structures are local talent. We want to hire local. Number 1, it's an opportunity for us to be a community member. Number 2, it's an opportunity for people who know the state and federal regulations within Ohio, all the governance. We want to work with people that do that so that we cover all of our bases and we're doing everything in the right steps. That's our intention. We're not trying to cut corners. We're trying to be transparent and we're trying to be good neighbors. We're also trying to create a good environment for the city, for people to come and work and want to work with us. Another statement I'd like to bring attention to is that we capped an oil well recently that was a producing oil well. When we first looked at this property, there was an oil well just south of the 3 existing buildings. And talking to the landowner said that oil well had not been a money producer for over 2 years, and he would gladly cap that and remove the equipment off of there if that was something that we would like. Because we were concerned about building a road to it in the middle of our facility so that they could maintain it and remove the oils. Said I'd rather cap it than go through any of that. So that's why we capped that, and we know where it's located. Everything was capped and completed through the Ohio regulations. I can pull it up. We've got all the certifications that was done correctly and taken care of. And then lastly, just on things that were brought to our attention that's been spoken is our company owner, his name is Gian Wu. He has been a visionary in this industry since about 2012 or 2011. He is of Chinese heritage, but he moved out of China, and he's not a member of the Chinese Communist Party. None of our money goes back to China. He lives in Singapore, and he's a Singapore national now. So, that being said, he's definitely our company owner. He gives us guidance. He's somebody that we work directly for. But, again, I have to clear up that we are not a Chinese-based company. And in fact, China does not allow Bitcoin mining anymore, as we've spoken. So, with our headquarters, our corporate headquarters being in Singapore, and our U.S. headquarters in San Jose. Okay? So those are just some of the comments that we've heard out there that we wanted to actually have, complete, honest understanding from everybody, to let everybody know. And then I've asked our electrical group that we've worked with to come in, and I've also asked our civil group to talk about the site development plan and the things that we've done to try to recognize the neighborhood, recognize the conditions and how to minimize the impact to them, but yet to try to improve the current situation while we're in the process of building our site. So with that being said, I'd like to bring up Amy and Mark to talk from First Energy side. Thank you.
Members of council. Some of the things that we heard throughout the week, we wanted to come back and just re-answer some questions maybe, and maybe explain a little bit more. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you this evening about was First Energy, how we adhere to a very strict federal transmission reliability standard. We are also mandated by the PJM, which is responsible for planning and operating the electric grid out of 13 states, including Ohio. So they are a grid operator, and PJM is responsible for ensuring the reliability of power, providing the capacity for the future. That being said, that's where the load study comes in. We are mandated, we are required to do a load study to determine if there is enough capacity to give power to the 220 megawatt building. And that's how we determined that we could do that. The other thing that I wanted to discuss with you is load shedding. First Energy does not load shed. One of the things I think that was on the Massillon Live was something about load shedding in Texas. We do not load shed. Now, it could come from the alternate supplier side, but on the regulated side, we do not load shed. So that will not be happening.
Could you please explain what load shedding is? I don't understand what that is. Mark?
Sure. But
Yes.
so basically, on like a hot day, PJM, which is the grid that Amy just spoke of, they may call for, hey, we need to reduce power because everybody's going to be using their air conditioners or things like that. So they may reach out to the alternate suppliers to say, hey, these customers that have these contracts set up, can you have them reduce their loads? An example, if you remember last Christmas when it was so cold, about a year and a half ago, we got the example of when they may call for load shedding at that time, just asking large customers to drop their loads.
Thank you. Are there any questions that you all have that we can answer further?
Mr. Lewis.
Welcome, Councilwoman Creamer.
My apologies, traffic.
No, we spoke briefly outside. I just wanted to kind of bring it out. You're speaking from the regulation side, as you already said. As far as the supplier side, obviously that might be a different conversation, or if you have certain questions about the impact it would have on the supply side, we'd have to maybe ask someone on that side of things.
That is correct.
And then am I accurate, because I've tried to explain what I think, so I might be wrong, that essentially you guys own the lines bringing the power in, and other suppliers might use your lines to get it to the destination? Is that kind of...
We are the distributor.
Mike.
Sorry. We are the distributor of the power. So the generation portion would come from that supplier side.
Mr. Pardon?
Thank you, Councilwoman Creamer. So to elaborate on that, the supplier could do load shedding though, however, is that correct?
There is a possibility. I don't know how often
They would.
PJM would.
Your microphone.
Good with that. I don't know how often PJM would load shed. Like, for instance, at the Christmas time, I believe that they talked about it, but I'm not sure that it ever went through.
Yeah, I know we do testing on it once a year. Customers are required to do a test, but I think it's been a while since it's actually been called for.
So it is an actual possibility then?
Yeah, based on their
Yes.
contracts.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ms. Robertson?
Oh, the substation. Let me clarify a little bit of that as well. So I know it's been talked about that there's so much power that they have to have a substation. The customer doesn't necessarily have to have a substation. They choose to have a substation because they want to be primary metered. They want to own their own equipment. They want to take care of their own power coming in. So we are supplying them with a direct line from our transmission to their substation where they are going to step that down. And I know I explained that a little bit last week, but just wanted to make sure that that was understood. There are many customers, even within Massillon, that own their own substations.
Ms. Harkinson.
So the load shedding, so I didn't think it was going to apply to us, but I mean, just as an example, that we were talking about how we had heard like Texas ones, you know, where they had to downplay and then they got paid back. So there's no contracts or about the electricity, and it's not going to affect the citizens in any way. And the electric company's not going to sign a contract where they have to pay if they have to reduce electricity on them or anything.
First Energy is not going, they do not have a contract with Bitty or anyone. Now, if they have an alternate supplier, I can't speak to that deregulated side. I'm only on the regulated side.
So on the deregulated side, you can't say for 100% that citizens won't be affected, but...
I don't work for the deregulated side, so I can't speak to it. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
No, you're welcome.
I can speak to
Yeah.
that. If you don't mind. Thank you.
I don't know why your mic keeps going.
Because we keep very large. Okay, currently we do not have any of that in our contracts with PJM, but we have had those in the past. And so what that is ultimately designed for is, like they've stated, is that if there's going to be a high demand, they do ask certain industrial people to shut down, and if they can. And so you negotiate a contract to do that, so that when they test the reliability, what they consider us is more of a battery bank, because they have the power, they have it available for you, they're distributing it to us. But on times of emergency or adverse conditions, things like that, that they need that power back, they ask us to shut down. And a site the size that we're building here in Massillon, we could probably shut that whole site down within 15 minutes to make sure that none of the residents or any of the other people that they distribute to will have an outage because we're consuming the power. So that's how we shut down for them. As far as the paybacks and all that stuff, that's above my pay grade on the contract negotiations on that stuff. But there are paybacks at times, but there's also times that we shut down, like when they're saying doing tests or whatever, or emergency, they'll take us down for 2 or 3 hours and then say, hey, come back, we're good, no worries, just come back online. And so then we go through the process, take about an hour to reinitialize and get everything else going on there. But the whole intent of that program is to shut down and save residents or water treatment facilities or hospitals from having emergency power, to make sure that they have adequate power. As we're a non-emergency type situation that has to be powered up, we can shut down. So at this time, we do not have any negotiations with the PJM for that.
Do you plan on getting into a contract for it?
Well, there will be those conversations, and if there's good plans to do that in Texas, we have to shut down just because it gets so hot. You know, they'll call like 2 or 3 hours ahead of time and say, hey, we're going to ask you to shut down from 5 to 9.
And then you get paid by them with the way your contract's set up?
I don't know all of what the payment plan is or how that is, or if it's rebates for the next years, because we purchase, sometimes we purchase power ahead of time, when it's kind of like a fuel is at a good price and you can purchase it, you know, a mass amount of, you purchase it at that. And then, so we try to get those good rates as far as purchasing, and part of that is, well, then you have to be able to shut down for so many hours to get that good rate, that kind of thing. We get a reduced cost on the upfront. But that, again, that's not my negotiations. I build the facilities, you know, try to do the best I can there, but that's on the other side, but that's part of some of the programs. I don't know what the PJM negotiations are on that, but currently we are not in any of those programs.
So would you have any type of alternative backup, like a generator?
No,
Gas or oil? Diesel, no?
No, we will not, no, because the only thing that we may have a small generator for is if we have a power outage that would shut off like our server room that provides network to all the units. So a small, for just a simple racking system, a small one like that, or to keep the central office if we have like a total site blackout, because of all the office and the computers and things in there for the plant manager and the ops manager and the daily operations. But other than that, like for the full site, for the 220 megawatts, we will not have a large-scale backup emergency diesel generator or anything like that.
Mr. Ray?
Any battery backup?
Battery backup takes a lot of space, and we don't have the space for that. No, sir.
Mr. Lewis?
So to summarize, here's what I'll say. The concern is that number. I think if you just say 320, I thought we were 275 megawatts. Is that what?
220.
220.
220.
Okay. So, you know, we're all trying to get top speed because this is not in any of our wheelhouses.
Sure.
When I'm reading, it's like a megawatt can like power like 800 to 1,000 homes. Is that about it?
That's above my pay grade. I will give that to the experts.
I think it's very close.
And that might for a full year, correct? I mean, I'm saying from the research, and this, and not
Well, to give you an example, so a large steel plant, Cleveland or Mansfield, was using about 110 to 120 megawatts on a given month.
on a given month.
On a given month, yeah. They're going to be using 220.
In a month.
Yeah.
So I think that's where some of the concern is, when you answered the question about the infrastructure being able to withstand that. I mean, you're talking a city increase, essentially, on this 24 acres. And the part you can't answer that I've gotten questions about is the supply side. Just understanding basic supply and demand economics. If you come in here and you increase the supply in my area threefold, then is it reasonable to assume that the demand, or you increase my demand by threefold, my supply will become more limited, therefore increasing my cost? Is, I think, is what people are concerned about.
Well, that's what the load study is for, to determine like, hey, is that power available and what all it would take to get it there. And obviously if that power was not available or would impact the community, region, then it would not be approved.
I have additional questions coming in late, and just let me know if it's already been discussed, I'll follow up.
I did have one real quick
Go
follow-up.
ahead.
Okay. As far as the demand is that, you know, they already said that they could have the power in the load studies. We didn't pay for the load studies or engage them to do the load studies, the previous landowners did. And so with that being said, that was part of the land deal, was that they said, well, we've already done the load study, there is power available, and this is, you know, so when we looked at the site to build the site, we said, okay, we know that there's going to be an availability of 220 megawatts here. Let's build a site that we can fit this in here in this space. So our designs went into that and looked at all the facets around the neighborhood and, you know, where it's located and how to orient the machines and prevailing winds and temperatures and all that stuff, and all that is considered. So knowing that the power was there, that was, you know, a huge part of the factor. Now, it was required for us to purchase some equipment for First Energy and their transmission yard so that they could provide that power directly to us. So we prepaid that so that they could order equipment. And then as far as the equipment goes into our substation, this is a pretty large, substantial investment to build your own substation. Everything that we go to purchase and order to put in there, we're working directly with First Energy's engineers and their project team to make sure that the equipment that we choose matches the equipment that they choose so that they can communicate properly, and so that the switching, let's just say we have an electrical issue on our site, it will open up and the transmission yard will keep producing and distributing power to the neighborhood, but it'll isolate us off so we don't cause a downfield disruption. So anytime you build your own substation, you have to make sure everything can connect and speak to each other correctly so that there's none of those issues. We're going through all those steps hand in hand, bi-weekly meetings, equipment approvals, and so on before we even, you know, make the purchases or order that long lead time item equipment. So I just wanted to clarify if there were any other questions on that.
So I have a question, and stop me if someone asks this. So are residents in that area going to be able to sit out on their patio and enjoy the evening? Are they going to be able to sleep at night with their windows open without hearing this noise that would be considered an annoyance?
Well, again, so the noise level that at 400 feet,
Right, was 40 decibels. So what would the recommended decibels be for someone to be able to sit outside on their patio?
well,
and
at
not have
30,
this interrupt their...
sure, at 30 decibels, it's considered a whisper. Okay? At 55 to 65 decibels is considered a talking, normal talking voice. So we have the decibels at about the level of a quiet home environment or residential normal street noise without any obstructions and us doing anything from there. So for us to reduce to get down to a quiet whisper, we're hoping that by putting the warehouse in between there, also the fence and then vegetation, let's see how low we can get. But we're expected to be right around the low 50s in decibels at the first house without any obstructions. So until I put those obstructions or until I have the structures designed, with whatever we can do for noise mitigation, this was doing an actual test on the largest facility we have at that distance. So, I mean, again, this site is going to be about 40% smaller. The whole site total is less than 50% of the large site. But I took it from the most largest light that we have with the least amount of interruptions in between. I wanted to get it the loudest that I could so that I could come with these numbers. These are the actual numbers that we have at Rockdale, our largest site.
So then our goal would be 30 decibels for these residents, and if you can't obtain that, would you consider a sound barrier wall?
We'll consider everything that we can, absolutely. If we could put up,
What's the goal? What would our goal be for these residents to?
yeah, I think anything under 40 decibels would be right in that whisper, soft tone, whatever. You're going to hear the machines. Now, the severity of them, or the loudness of them, that's our intent, is to bring industrial noise down to next to nothing.
Are there going to be any peaks or valleys throughout the day, some louder, some?
No, when it's all running, it'll all be the same sound. Unless of course you have natural winds, if the winds carry the noise or something, or, sorry. Whatever, but the intent is that if we're running, we're running. All the machines are up and running, it's going to be the same. You can't turn them up and make them louder. We can't turn them down and make them quieter. If they're running, they're running.
So you put acoustic loopers on fans?
Well, no, the fans are actually on the computers themselves. We're not putting loopers, but on the exhaust, there will be loopers. On the exhaust side, there will be loopers, yes. And so the fans will push them through. And the loopers are used for if you have rains that come in too, you want to deflect the rains and so on. But there will be loopers on the outgoing side. And again, with the wood wall that we're putting up, if that doesn't get us where we want, we'll do the next steps. But again, I'm very hopeful when you go into a detailed structural design that hopefully we can come up with a sound solution. And we'll do audible computer testing. We'll do the same thing with thermodynamics for heat evacuation. Every study that we can do to try to engineer the noise levels out of it as much as possible. That's the first step. Once the site's built up and operational and fully operational, we'll go through another round of testing and then go into the next step of, what else can we do? But again, we're going to try our best educated guess is by putting up the wall, putting up new vegetation. The first buildings are all oriented away from the residents. We're doing what we believe to be true. If it's not good enough, then we'll do the next steps. We're totally vested in doing the right thing on this.
Mr. Lombardi, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Creamer. We've talked a lot about noise and energy. This litigation is about a replat, And I think the main thing that we need to be concerned with right here and now, and I think the main thing that a lot of the residents right there are concerned with, is the water management off of this property. And as far as I'm concerned, we were given a half-baked explanation to how we were managing the water off of this. We were given a map, and somebody sat there and pointed at the map that we couldn't see where they were pointing at. And I'd like to get a very detailed explanation as to what's going to happen with the water and how it will affect the residents in the neighborhood.
Yes, sir. Approved. I mean, totally hear you, and that's why I've got some handouts I'd like to pass out. Could you grab them and pass it down? And at this time, I'll have Kevin from SBM do a detailed explanation of the site development plan and the water abatement plan that we put in. Thank you. He'll show you on the map. So this down there, and these are the existing buildings.
Can you show them your side and our side? Shoot that.
Please go ahead.
My name is Kevin Noble, engineering firm Sheezer Buckley Mayfield. I was here presented a couple weeks ago. Our firm did do the site design work, and so what I do is kind of run through again stormwater management. I passed out a couple maps. I've got a larger plan view, so I'll kind of point some things out. But before I do that, I'll give you just a couple comments. Stormwater management is regulated not only by your city requirements, but by Stark Soil and Water. And so they do have development requirements. Being any development within the city of Massillon has to follow those requirements, and those approvals need to be received. The design of this plan meets those requirements, and the plans have been accepted both by the city engineer and by Stark Soil and Water. So we have adhered to the regulations that are in place. What I wanted to bring up today is, and this probably relates a little bit to my relationship with Bid Deer and their commitment to providing a good project. So when I first sat down with Bid Deer, I am from this area. I knew of some of the flooding that happens in there, and I explained that to Mr. Hansen a little bit, and our conversations were, we can obviously meet the regulations that are in place. We're required to do that. But I also proposed that we do some additional things to help out the situation. And those things cost money, and so obviously as the owner's engineer, it's my responsibility to get in plans that are developable and to meet code, but I also need to get his approval in case if they're willing to spend a little extra money. So I'm going to walk through what the stormwater management system is today. I'm going to step away from Mike, but I'll talk loud enough you should be able to pick me up. And I'll point out a couple things, and then I'll open it up. And then you can ask any questions.
So just to familiar yourself with the site, this is the yard over here, the storage yard over here. Upwards north is the industrial parkway, or the industrial subdivision that we have. First Energy substation is down here, and we have the residential area on the west side on the left hand. Just what you're seeing here is First Energy substation's here. The developer's proposed substation is in here, so the cross connection will be made between, and then the electric would go from the substation out to these units. The units, as you see in blue, these are the computer housing units that are kind of lined up in the rectangle-shaped skinnier ones. They are proposing 2 warehouses. There's a warehouse on here, and this is the other second, the larger warehouse, which was intentionally put on the west side so that we help block some of the view and the noise to the residential areas. And the pink then is the roadway system that basically just gets golf carts or cars, whatever, around the facility. So I've talked a little bit about stormwater management. Last week, there were some questions on what the city's doing and our role in that. When the property was first purchased, the city had 2 different systems that they collect stormwater and they dumped it into this site. And via some storm drains, those drainage patterns kind of worked itself through the site and they got down to this low spot where there's a culvert at. The replat that you're really looking at today is replatting the easements that were on the drainage courses which bisect the site and vacating those easements and rerouting, the developer is rerouting the storm sewer systems around the site, and I'll show you those. The first system came in off of, it picks up stuff from the industrial parkway, it dumped itself in near where this warehouse is at, and then it kind of ran down through the middle, down to where the culvert is. Currently what we're doing today is we're going to pick up that same runoff. Again, that's all city runoff. It comes off their street. That's city water, not necessarily what's developed here with this site. City water, we're going to pick it up, we're going to route it around the perimeter, and we're going to take it and dump it by where that culvert is. Not really doing anything with that water, not adding anything to it. We're simply just picking it up and taking it around the site. So now we get to the point what we're helping the situation out. So what I've known from my experience living here or being close to this area is when it does, we get heavy rains, this area where my hand's at, stormwater management, this stream and in the southwest corner floods. And so we've done 2 things with this. One, the regulations, the city's regulations and Stark Soil basically says you cannot, whatever water this site generates before development, okay, let's say it's a cupful. So during a rainfall, if it develops a cupful of rainfall before development, after development, you can't release any more than what that cupful would be, okay? And how I do that is I take this site water and I put it in a pond. I referred to it last time as a bathtub. Turn the bathtub spigot on full blast, let it start filling the tub out. The tub fills up, and then you slowly open your little drain plug, and then a little bit goes out at a time. So it's not a huge rush. And so the thought is then, if you have a huge rush, that's what backs up in the culvert, that's what floods this. So we're going to pick that water up and we're going to store it. That's what your regulations have. What we're going to do to enhance it, and again, both these plants have been approved, what we're going to do to enhance that, the second system that the city has comes again off of Industrial Parkway. Again, it's city water picked up in their system, they maintain it. We're going to pick that system up that before went right down the middle of the site. We're going to pick it up basically at the middle of the site. We're going to route it around our new buildings, and we're going to take that system and put it into the detention pond. And I emphasize that because really, if we just take that system, route it all the way around, which is what we should be doing, we could be doing, we wouldn't have any ability to control that water. That's the city's water, that's not the developer's water. But the developer was willing to enlarge this pond, make it bigger than what it needs to be. We're going to take that city water that currently goes down there at a faster rate, and we're going to put it into our pond, and we're going to also store that and release that at a lower rate. So not only are we controlling what we have here, we're really going to help the situation because we're taking this city water and we're going to put it in our pond and we're going to let that bath. So the bathtub really doesn't need to be this big. We're going to make the bathtub this big. We're going to use more valuable land, but we're going to make it this big to help this flooding situation down. The other point I will make on this is we are also, when you think about flood, you think about or anything that gets wet on you. The more volume you have available for that water to sit, the lower the water surface elevation is. So if I'm taking a whole bunch of water, I'm going to put it in my hand, it may overtop. If I spread my hand out that same amount of water, it may not overtop my water, it may only be half full. And so what we're doing is, there's a mound here that we're keeping, but there's a low area down here on this side of the stream, on the southwest side of the stream. We're going to clear some of that out. We're going to take some of that dirt out, and we're going to allow this area to store some water when you get real heavy rains. So again, that's something that doesn't need to be done. That's not required by code. It's not required by this development. But that's something the developer was willing to help assist in the flooding problem in this situation. I think that is, yeah, I think that's my summary.
Mr. Lombardi?
Thank you, Councilwoman Creer. So this area southwest of the creek, that's going to be like a marshy wetland type thing then, is what that's going to become?
So it's currently, if you walk that area today, you can walk it. It's dry during normal conditions. All that is going to be, so you're really not going to, you're not changing that environment for what it is today to what is after. We're actually putting less water down in there because that area receives water today from the one system I said we're putting into the pond. So whatever conditions were today, will it be wet after a storm? Yes. Will it dry up? Yes, it will. So it will be a better system. That area will be drier after development than it is before development. And I say that because we're taking less water to that area.
Ms. Hargreaves?
So you're talking about that mound in the corner. Is that where the old well that's been out of commission for years, not the well that you guys, the previous owner from you, but there was one like that was taken out, I don't know if it was 08 or whatever, there was a tank that was left in there that was leaking. And the neighbors said the soil down there on that mound, like you can look and you can see the blackness, you can smell the oil where it's been leaking for years. This is not the well that you guys capped, this is the other well that was there that they never took the leaking tank out.
Yeah,
And the concern, like that whole area through there, like you know, when you're putting on, like when it rains, it all floods now. So we're still taking everything, I mean, so the pond is going to be actually how big?
I'll show you, I'm going to step up to them.
So I'm just concerned, like, I mean, if all that water in the pond overflows, because that area where the pond is floods over. And I mean, kind of what happens out there is, you know, the ground absorbs the water and helps with it too, because what happens when it, you know, you get heavy rains, it fills up all there and then the whole area floods because the creek itself, when you get further down behind the main substation across the street, that floods over there too, because basically the creek just kind of goes into a small trickle and isn't getting down to the river. That's why they are having so much, been having problems for years down there. And that's why I think the land was most likely never developed. So the concern for the residents is that, you know, we're still, even though with the pond, it's still, all the water's going to that one area, and where it's going to go, it's down the road, it's still plugged. I mean, it goes through, but it goes through slow. So when, you know, when it floods, the ground absorbs it. Well, now the ground is gone and covered with concrete. And so I understand that water's going to go to the pond, but I mean, so what if it doesn't hold it? And then what happens?
I'll step up with the plan real quick to answer the question. Two questions were raised. I'll talk about the oil, the gas well first. So the only gas well I know of was in here. This is one that was capped within the past 6 months. So on the upper top of your plan, you'll see there's a clear landscape area. I do not know of any, I don't have records of anything down here in that southeast corner. Now we're not, you know, really on this side of the creek, we're not doing any development at all. Like we're not building, we're not doing anything in that hilly area. I did say we're going to, you know, clean this area up over here for a little extra storage. But as far as being on that hill, we're not doing anything. The second part, the other question was just, we get a lot of rains, it gets absorbed in the soils, where does this water go? It doesn't have a great outlet. And that is correct, it does not have a great outlet. It goes into, fortunately this is very sandy soil, which has been a blessing for us. And we do have some good, there was a mine one time, First Energy a long time. If you look in the 40s and 50s maps, you can see they were doing some mining down in there. And in my conversations with the city engineer not here right now, but my conversations with the city and with his staff is they think over time that was the outlet to this whole system. You know, the city water coming on this direction, city water coming down the middle. The outlet at one time was buried, probably because there was so much sand it seemed to work. You can look at the 40s maps, you can look at the 50s map, and you can kind of start seeing it filled in. My understanding from the city service director is they have tried to do some TVing and tried to solve that issue, but they just haven't been. So what we did, again, that was my conversations with Mr. Hanson early on, is how can we help solve this problem? The comment that the councilwoman made was, what if we get a real big storm? Well, this system, by your code and by Stark Soil and Water, is designed for a 100-year storm. Please know that most of your pipes, including the one where the city has us routing around, including the system that's coming down here, is only sized for a 10-year storm. So when you have it in the engineering world, once you get to a point that's a 100-year storm, you are more concerned about life safety at that point. And if you think about it, I'm going to contain 100-year here, but again, really everything else is only containing 10 years. So yes, is there going to be flooding in the street? Is water going to be coming over the top of an inlet? Yes, that's through. Anytime you get a 100-year storm through the city, that is going to happen. But by your regulations, which we're following, this system will handle a 100-year storm. Anything above a 100-year storm, it has what's called an emergency spillway, and water then kind of goes over an embankment that's rocked, so we don't erode the embankment area. But again, this is sized for a 100-year storm, where all our other infrastructure. This is only city Massillon. That's a typical engineered municipal system. It is designed for a 10-year storm.
Mr. Lewis?
These are some detail questions. The streets, these pink, what material will this be?
So that would be hard surface. That's going to be asphalt, blue asphalt.
And the lighter pink around the blue?
So the blue is the buildings, the pink is asphalt, and then it'll be gravel in between it, yes. And so we're using gravel again. Gravel provides us, this is a very sandy area, so instead of paving that or doing something that would have hard surface, we're using that to basically help us detain water. So water will land in that, we're going to take our downspouts from a building, we're going to stick them into this gravel area and let that perk in the ground. We're blessed that these buildings do not have any basements, we don't have to worry about anything like that. These are slab on grade. So we're really just trying to recharge the water surface that we have below us.
And then the matter that's in front of the council now is, it's a replat, which is essentially, you're just saying that all we're asking for is that there's two water systems that are collecting city water running through the middle of this property, that we vacate those, and then you're going to reroute them around your property to reconnect. And that is all this legislation is doing, if I'm understanding correctly?
That's correct. I'll show you something on the map. Yeah, so the question is that this replat, what started this whole thing is bisecting this site in the north-south direction and east-west direction are these two drainage courses that I talked about that's picking up this city water. So it made that site obviously very hard to develop with those drainage courses in the middle. We're doing, as I explained a couple weeks ago, we're going to take this one system from the north, we're going to route it around. The developer's paying for that, but the city will have an easement on that and the city will maintain it. It's really all city water. I'm not tying any building into it, there's no parking lot water going into it, that's all city. What we did work out with the city on the other system, so the other system we're going to route it around the other direction, we're going to go on the west side, but the city was concerned about how do we get in and maintain that. They can maintain this off of 9th Street, they can get access to it, and so the developer's paying to put this system in, it's a very large pipe, and there's an easement on that, but the easement agreement says that the developer will maintain that system. So he'll go in, and if it needs to be scoured out, he'll scour it out. If it needs a manhole needs to be, dirt needs to be collected from it, he'll do that. And the easement's on there in case the developer fails to do that. It still gives the city the right, but if a pipe fails or something happens, that is on the developer. The developer on this west system, okay, we have two systems, on the west system, he will maintain that. The east system will be maintained by the city.
And just to clarify again, that west system goes into that storm pond.
Yeah, so normally the west, in normal development, normal engineering, we would just simply take those two systems and route them around. It's not the developer's water, but yes, to answer your question, again, I want to drive the point home. I get it, I understand the flooding situation, but this this is really enhancing, and the developer's spending extra money to make this thing work. Yes, to answer your question, that other system goes into the pond, which is designed for 100-year storm, which will really release the water at a very slow rate.
Mr. Gray?
Just a question. I know that you guys are going to implement water immersion where you can cool it with water. Where are your tanks going to be, and what are you going to do with your water as it cycles out? Because I'm looking up and it says that, I don't know how accurate that is. It says about 16,000 liters of water on average. I mean, obviously that's over a bigger scale of water, so I don't know how much individually you guys are using to cool your systems, but how is that water going to circulate, and how much water do you guys plan to use?
I'm going to step to the back a bit. So the developer is, and I talked to you about this white area, that's where that existing tank is. We're just keeping that as landscape area to probably put some gravel in there. Beside that, in the red circle with some concrete hatching is actually what that is. There's a water tower. So we're going to take water from Aqua, Ohio. We'll put it in this tank, and then every one of these buildings will have a 5,000-gallon buried tank underneath or right beside the building. And that tank then will, from that tank, so 5,000 gallons, if you know anything about your septic tanks, that's usually a 2,000-gallon tank. So if you visualize how big of that, it's 2.5 times that size. And that tank will be split into half, and we'll pump out of the clean half. We're going to run it through this evaporator, cool it off, and then we'll pick up whatever water's left. So anything we're going to lose is through evaporation. We're going to, it's a drip process, works its way through this radiator, almost like a car, and we'll pick the water up in a trough below, and we'll take it back into the dirty half of that 5,000-gallon tank. We'll be able to clean that up. It's going to go be a weir back to the first half again, and it just continues cycle. So we'll have a little bit, it'll be some fill to start with, but once we start, the only water we're losing is evaporation, and you can think that if you had a big pond in your backyard, it would be the same type of evaporation when you get the heat evaporating.
Just to continue on, as far as the water itself, obviously it's filled with carbon. As a GC, like if I take a hot water tank, I think if you make it relevant to a home or residence, maybe we can better understand it. So if you have a hot water tank and the water constantly circulates through it, over time there's like a buildup of this like calcium stuff in the bottom of it. What happens with that stuff? What do you do with that? Because obviously you may lose with evaporation, but then you're still going to also have a waste of water, correct? Water waste.
You are correct. So this water, we're using evaporation, and we'll have, it's called makeup water, so we're going to fill water back in to kind of make that system up. But to answer your question, that's why we have a dirty side and a clean side. So the clean side, number one, there'll be some foam or scum on the top of it that they'll be able to rake and clean out. But it also gives them the chance to test that water, and if that water becomes, for some reason, aggressive for the system, they can add some chemicals to it. This water is completely separate from the city water. That's why we have that water tower. It's totally independent. There's backflow preventers to prevent anything from going in. So this is what I would call, in essence, almost a closed system that we can kind of clean up ourselves. But that's why we're doing clean half and dirty half instead of just dumping it all over one side.
Mr. Lombardi?
Thank you, Mrs. Kramer. This evaporator wall, there's one of these walls, I take it, in each one of these buildings that are going to have to house the servers. Is this an open wall to the outside, or is this sitting inside a closed building?
So this, Mr. Hanson talked about the louver. So it's on the outside face, but inside the building. And so the louver will allow some air kind of move through that, but the louver kind of conceals it so you don't, almost like you would have a louver on your exhaust fan on your house or on a company. It does sit, this thing does sit on the outside wall, but it's protected by the louver.
So I guess I'm trying to understand, these buildings, are they open to the one side then? I mean with just a radiator in between the elements and the computer systems, or is there a solid wall somewhere? I guess what I'm trying to get at is you've got this building full of computer servers that their fans are running, and Anybody who's been in a server room can tell you that can get pretty loud. Is there just this evaporator wall between them and the outside?
Yeah, so the buildings themselves, and you can kind of see the shape that we have situated on the plans. So the buildings themselves are pre-engineered metal buildings, and they'll have walls on 3 sides, and the 4th side will be this outdoor louver apparatus. And then, as Mr. Hanson was kind of saying, those two, so one building, put 2 buildings up here with my hands, one building will have the louver on this side blowing this direction, the other one will have the louver on this side blowing this direction. So the 2 louvers will kind of be facing each other to minimize the amount of noise that comes out of that. But to answer your question, there's 3 sides, and one side will be a louver. There'll be partition pieces, because obviously we've got a pre-engineered post that we'll have. So it won't be a complete wall that's a louver. We'll have a louver, and then we'll have a separation piece and a louver and a separation piece. But it's essentially a louver wall.
Any additional questions? Ms. Herrickson?
I actually have a question about the sound too, but for probably the other gentleman. So explain to me, if you could explain again, you said you guys did an experiment last week or whatever, so is the Texas Rockdale all on this quiet system where you're saying it cannot be heard, or did you guys just do an experiment on a small area, or?
No, I took the largest line that we have.
So when you say a line, how many computers is that?
That line has over,
Sorry. I'm just trying to understand how you're going to get the noise down. You know, I'm just, the huge concern about the noise and how they, 50 decibels, you know, every decibel you add cause all these health problems to people. And, you know, even there were neighbors that went down to Tennessee. They drove down there and they were 400 feet away. And she said it still was like, you know, it was really loud in front of the facility. They said one side of the facility was 70, the other side was 90. They got 400 feet away. It was still, it wasn't, it went down. I think she said it was, I don't know if it was still 70, but it was just like a constant beehive, you know, that just never stops. So what exactly, so is the Rockdale facility have all these things that make theirs quiet, or you guys were just doing the experiment on a small area, or?
No, to answer your question, the Rockdale site is our largest site. And when I say one line has over 17,000 miners on it. So 17, and there's 8, 9, 11 lines in Rockdale. So I took the biggest line that we have, and I wanted to take the biggest retrofit building that we have. And this is the site that's in an old Alcoa mining facility, or Alcoa aluminum ore smelting facility.
So you're inside almost?
No, I'm outside. I'm right at the machines and then walking away from the machines from the building, right? Same thing that I want to do here, demonstrating there. However, this site, the racks are 24 high. The one that we're going to do here is 12. We're planning about a 40% reduction of miners, rack system, okay? But that was a retrofit building. Same thing in Tennessee. Those buildings were pre-existing, and so they were retrofit buildings. What I'm saying here in Massillon is that we are working with a structural engineer group when we pick our vendor we're going to work with, and we are going to design from the bottom up. We know what exists in our current buildings that were retrofit. So we are going to engage an engineering group to help us minimize the noise instead of doing a 2-sided wall building where it just goes through back and forth. We're looking at a 3-sided. How do we put in engineered things to minimize the noises? Is there a soundproofing material that we can put inside these walls? What can we do to minimize this? So I can't tell you at this time how far down I can get it, but just know our company is dedicated to doing this right, and we will spare no expense to do it right. We will go through the testing. We'll go through the auto testing. We'll go through the heat mitigation testing, heat abatement, all of these factors that what we call as lessons learned from previous builds. We're going to try to implement everything into this build. Give it our best effort, give it our best engineering, best thing that we can do. Build the buildings, energize the plant, If we still have a noise problem that exceeds our expectations below 40 decibels, whatever that number is that we figure out, then we'll do the next steps. Okay, now how do we fix this even more? Okay, so I can't tell you until we design the buildings and work through that process with engineers that this is going to be put in their forefront and their attention. I can't tell you how far we can get down there until we do it. But our intention is to do the best that we can, and to be, we know we can get better than what we currently are in other facilities.
Right,
And-
'cause
and my-
currently, like, every facility, 100% makes noise.
Well, it's the business, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a lot of your locations are remote locations.
Well, the
Yeah.
one in Tennessee, we've got other industrial neighbors next to us. But, yeah, and I've been to that site a couple times, but I just know the Texas site is vast. And so my demonstration to you guys is to come to you and say, look, I took the biggest one that we have, here's the noise levels, and this is huge. I mean, it's a mega site. And so I wanted to say, if I'm this noisy at this point, I know I'm going to do better here, just because we're starting with a 40% reduction. The site's over half this less than what the site in Texas is, but we're already reducing the size of the racking to 40%, cutting it way down, trying to minimize that instead of building, 24 racks high is a very high building, probably 35, 40 feet high. We're not going to build that high. But our intention is to engage professionals to help us do this the right way. And again, if we don't get there on the first truck, we keep going. Our company's dedicated to making this right for the neighborhood and for us and for the community, is to do the right thing. And at some point, I hope that we can get through this process and we can come back to this table in 3 years and everybody says, hey, it turned out better than we thought, or we've worked through and came up with a good product. That's our complete intentions. We're not hiding from anything. We're not running from anything. We know the issues that are out there, and we're dedicated to correcting those issues and minimizing the impact to the community. We absolutely 100% are dedicated to that.
Well, that's good to hear. I know there's still, the concern is that, the other ones in the noise, and they're just terrified. These people, they've lived there for generations. There's a lot of people, 17th Street, the people up there, they're starting to find out about it. That's their backyard too, and that's all like a valley, and noise travels up. I don't know, it's a huge concern. This is Industrial 1, and Industrial 1 is not supposed to have any effect on residents. And there's a residential neighborhood, and there's residents, up the other side that are a little farther away, 0.3 to half a mile away. And when you're hearing sound and travel to it's kind of scary. Have you, considered like moving to Industrial 2? We're getting more than. Well, and we have plenty of industrial land in Massillon right next door to Old Republic Steel Site, where you could still go that way and connect into it.
I can address this just slightly. That when we were approached by the previous landowner that the power was available and they had the acreage available, and that this was in an industrial zoned piece of property already. We had meetings here with the previous administration, with the city engineers, the economic development, and we were, reassured that if we were to come in and purchase this land and develop it, that we were within the tier of the industrial park, and that they were supportive of the jobs and the creation and the economic development. So, it wasn't, we didn't come in and make a hasty decision. There was lots of negotiations, also negotiations with First Energy, and just making sure that, we did our due diligence the best that we could. And so, at that time, this was the opportunity that was presented to us for land, and we hadn't looked at anything else, nothing else had been brought forward to our company.
Right.
So that's how we identified this property, and then, again, I still think, even with the residents next to us, of course, we are going to pay very close attention and try to do our best. I think the location is fantastic with the utilities that are there, you've got a cell tower there for backup, we've got water, you've got emergency services, you've got a great route, industrial route for delivery trucks to come, things like that. You've got 3 buildings, one that we'll tear down and rebuild a new office building, but then 2 existing buildings that we can use as a shipping and receiving and a commercial warehouse. I mean, and a technician place. I mean, there's a lot of really good benefits when the company's looking for a property where they would like to build. And then meeting with the government officials here in the community, we thought that this was a very good partnership that we could create.
Yeah, if I can finish. So this council knew nothing about it till like the day of the work session. I knew about it ahead of time because people were coming to me, you know, looking things up, reading, then I started reading, looking things up, and you're hearing all this bad stuff and all this harm, and, you know, and it feels like what you read, how they like sneak in, and all of a sudden they don't know what's going on, and it pops up and it's open. No one addressed anything with us until 2 weeks ago. And we were under the impression when we asked, last week when I asked Ted, he said the administration didn't want it. So you're saying that you talked to the previous administration and they were supportive of this?
They were. They were, in fact.
But no one, like, you know, told us or anything. So I guess in order to alleviate all these fears and concerns, so you're saying we're going to make this a premier plan, we're going to make it quiet, we're going to be a good neighbor. That would be great. But there's these concerns that we have, you know, there's other concerns. Would you be willing, if Mrs. Constable Creamer wanted to have a public hearing to address these concerns to people at a public hearing? It's not like illegal, it's just where you're like talking to the public before this is going in and they can ask you questions. I mean, I think you're doing a good job answering the questions today. I also feel in my heart that, you know, this is a lot of money and you guys are all paid to get the job done. You know, and you want this here, and we are a valuable city, and we can, you know, I don't feel, you know, I'm concerned over the number of jobs. You know, you're saying you're going to hire within. I really hope you do. I mean, in Ohio, we have a lot of computer engineers. You know, from what I've read and listened to of congressional hearings, you know, the reality came down. You really didn't often, I mean, maybe you or other facilities, I'm just saying in general, the communities really didn't get a lot of jobs out of it. And so when I look at the benefit and the thought of, like, you know, ruining this whole area with noise, that makes me oppose it.
Sure.
You know, and when I look at our laws in Industrial 1, it's not supposed to have any effect on the neighborhood. Something of this magnitude to me should be in Industrial 2.
Okay.
You know, so like with your sincerity and your solutions and a lot of things, you know, and maybe that would ease it. And then if the neighbors say, you know what, Julie, you know, go ahead, you know, I got to stick with, you know, representing the people in Massillon and even the neighborhood in very next door, because we're putting it in Massillon and it's affecting them and they're part of our community.
Sure.
You know, so you're, you know, I don't know, how do you feel about something like that?
Well, again, Bid Deer has not hidden from anybody, and we'll talk to anybody. And if that's something that, you know, the local government and entities want us to do, we'll be here to do it. We support transparency. We're not trying to come in, and if you talk to the city of Rockdale and ask them what the economic impact was when we took that old
And that's a city of about 5,000 people? Because Rockdale's kind of in the middle of nowhere when I look at it.
About 5,000, but when in 2010, when they shut down the Alcoa plant, they lost over 12,000 jobs.
Sure.
And so it definitely became an economically changed environment. And they were a union place, and it was built that town. And then the town became very depressed. Businesses left, but they were very happy and continue to be so that we're there and we're part of the community, because we do invest in the community, but we also hire from the community. And so I've been working for Bid Deer for almost 3 years. June will be 3 years. Previous to that, I was a project manager for municipal. So I'm used to dealing with councils and boards and working on municipal projects. So I was very aware and comfortable with city environments. I'm an Army vet, spent 7 years in 82nd Airborne Division. I've served in the 1st Gulf War. If I would have joined this company and had any suspicions that this company was not a legit company, I didn't have to leave a municipal. As we all know, when you work for a city, you've got great benefits, you've got great retirements, but I was excited about the challenge of this job. And I can say proudly that I'm a very happy, extremely proud member of this team. And the employees that work with us, I think they truly enjoy their jobs. They're good jobs. They're consistent, well-paid, you know, they come to work and for the most part, you know, I mean, you go through your ups and your downs and your whatevers, but they're happy having good jobs. And that's what we plan to bring here. And like I said, 3 years from now, I'm hopeful that we've built, we've been up and energized, we're community engaged, we've hired locally, and we see that we're a contributor to this community, and we'll be for, you know, 50 years. You know, I want us to be a non-factor in a conversation like this because we're an employer in the company. And that's who we want to be, and that's what we bring forward. As far as the different tiers in the land, you know, that's not for me to determine or how that works within your governances, but if they had to rezone the land or whatever, we would do whatever we had to be able to meet whatever that is. I don't know, but from the very beginning, we were told with the previous administration that our project was acceptable for the land that we were getting ready to purchase, and they were supportive of the project. Enough to say that the previous mayor, she asked me to come back in the fall to go to a football game with her and represent our company. I had a bad hip, I had a hip replaced, I couldn't get up and down the stairs. So to say that the previous regime did not support this, I've never had that impression from her or from the city engineers and the group that we were working with. And as far as when this was presented to the council, I don't know what the steps are, but from the very beginning, our site development was working with, you know, Ohio EPA, with Stark and Soil, with the city engineers, everything that, until it's ready to give to the council, I don't know what that step and phase is, but we've been supportive of the whole site development from the very get-go, and whatever was required. That's why we wanted to hire local, because I don't know your regulations, I don't know what's required and what those steps are. So we wanted to hire the people that know those regulations.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes, I would like to call up the Director of Development, Aaron King, if that's okay. I'll preface this with a little bit. Some of the way I'm looking at what we're discussing now is more from a legalistic point of view of where are we in this process, what authorities and responsibilities do we actually have as a council. You know, it was brought up, you know, we didn't hear about it in the past, and I agree, it would have been nice to see this coming, but at the same time, I also know that sometimes during economic development, deals are being made, discussions are being had, private purchases that don't involve the city are going on that make deals happen. So that might not be why we always get to speak. But what really matters to me right now is I want, which is what this is, there is the discussion about noise. Now, do we know, or do we have somewhere in our code that designates a specific decibel level that they cannot exceed?
To my knowledge, no. And I thought there was. And I spoke with Frank Silla, the chief building official. I reviewed all of the, not every word of the code, but every pertinent part of the code. And I do not see anywhere a decibel number identified as a threshold. I did hear that someone from the city referred to a 75 decibel threshold. I cannot find that anywhere in the code. So unless somebody points that out or states it's in this weird section that you didn't think to look, I mean, when you get on the website, you can search for keywords, you can search for sound, you can search for decibel, you can search for all the applicable words or phrases, and it will pull up everything in probably dozens of searches. I have not found that. So I think we have to operate under the assumption that in any zoning district, there is no sound requirement, including I-1 and 2.
Okay. That was my first, because even I would even argue that in the spirit of what, and I know you're not taking the stance per se right there, that 75 is kind of loud, that's a highway. So that to me doesn't seem like it would be the spirit of not infringing upon your neighbor, because the highway would be. But I think it would be worse maybe if we can do some research of what maybe, if there are other communities that have some decibel requirements. And then I'm not going to have anybody from Bit here commit now, but if there are, one position we would have as a council, we have to look at what can we actually do. Because at the end of the day, this land is already owned, and it's already under the beginning steps of development. All we're doing is they're asking for us to replat. We could say no to the replat, and if they wanted to re-engineer it somehow, we couldn't stop them. That's the reality of the situation. So, but if we find a decibel requirement, or that was reasonable, and then a bit here agree that, hey, yes, that is reasonable, we will not complain if you were to adjust your local code for that level. I think that would be a reasonable compromise to this, whatever that level would be. I would just want to make sure that we have the developer on board so they didn't try to claim later that we were negotiating bad faith.
I agree with that. Mr. Lewis, I did do some initial research regarding like noise pollution, noise code. They do have certain levels, certain decibels, certain period of time, 12-hour period, 24-hour period, 48-hour period. I'm not ready to recite any of that yet. I was just reviewing it real quickly. But that's kind of where, just in the research that I've done in other areas that have had issues with data mining, there was no type of threshold, and the states did not have thresholds. So I would like to evaluate our I-1 companies first within the city. Take that level before we start grasping at a number. We have to evaluate all of our businesses that are zoned I-1, get their level, and then we proceed from there and evaluate the environment, like are they mere residents versus non-residents, and then move forward with that type of approach would be my opinion.
I agree with that, Ms. Kramer. Because not only, I think this situation is just the tip of the iceberg. As technology continues to grow and more data warehouses, whether they end up being Bitcoin mining operations or just other huge servers, this same situation is going to continue to arise. And I would think that under our current code, if we don't say a specific number, I think legally in a court of law, it would be very hard to say that your noise is violating our code because you don't have a number. And then it starts to become dependent on each person's opinion. So that was my first thing. The other thing is that I wanted to ask you real quick, the replat that we're looking at tonight, that would be required essentially or be requested no matter who developed here, I would imagine, correct? Because as the developer kind of pointed out, these things go right through the center of the property, which makes it hard to build on.
Correct. The ordinance at hand deals with combining a couple lots and moving the easements, which, if you look at where the easements are now, being basically crosshairs in the middle of the property, it's virtually impossible to build anything over that. You can pave over an easement, you can't put a building over an easement. They have to be accessible and then fixed. So you're correct. Anybody that would look at this site is dealing with the same issues.
And I just point these out because I do have concerns, I've voiced some concerns around noise and power usage, but I also try to look at it as a body. What can we really do? Right now, all we can do is say no to replat. And what does that achieve? For those who are concerned about the well-being of the neighborhood, does saying no to replat achieve that goal? And I don't believe it would, because technically they're still landowners. They would just redesign the property so that they could get around their replatted concerns. and still build, and the city couldn't stop them because they'd be operating within the current law as it's written. So I think our approach needs to be, here's our concerns, how do we work together and make it so that we can get our code up to date, modernized, and make it so that our neighbors are getting what they need, and they can still have their happy neighborhood that we want everybody to enjoy. That this company now has a legal right to this property and ability to develop it, and is able to achieve their end game. I think that needs to be our approach moving forward. That's just my opinion.
Can I add something, Mrs. Kramer? If you look at the Perry Township zoning code, the neighborhood to the west of this property is not zoned residential. It is zoned MD multi-use overlay. It is a mixed-use zoning district. Their zoning code was amended in 1996. I don't know if that's when this was added or if it was before, but in pink shows the neighborhood. It shows that it is a mixed-use zone. From their zoning code, it states, the purpose of this district is to provide for a variety of residential, retail, service, and administrative establishments that are required to serve a dense and rapidly developing trading and commercial area. This district is also intended to accommodate those residents wishing to live, work, and engage in retail trade in close proximity to major thoroughfares within Perry Township, Stark County. If these folks, the protections, it is one of the very few areas in Perry Township that has this mixed-use designation. Based on that, there's nothing from the neighbor's standpoint, if they're looking for protection from industrial or commercial. In the Perry Township, by writing this, the Perry Township trustees acknowledged that this area was a growing commercial and industrial area, right? Under this zoning category, there's nothing that precludes someone from coming in to that neighborhood, buying 2 homes, tearing them down, and building a convenience store. And that's a matter that the residents should address with Perry Township if they want to protect their property rights, because right now, any of the residential, retail, service, developing, trade, I mean, all these other issues could go on in that neighborhood based on the township zoning designation. Now, we don't have any control over that. We are not in charge of the zoning of Perry Township at all. So I found that interesting because there could be some other concerns for those folks too, not just being adjacent to a large industrial area.
Ms. Cunningham?
Thank you. Does anybody know what Republic Steel was zoned as, which is right across the street?
I too.
Thanks.
And the property owner could certainly apply for a rezoning of the property to go from I-1 to I-2. That would be within their purview, should they choose.
Mr. Lewis?
I just want to point out, because I also hear that we have to remember private property rights. We, as a government, do not get to say, why did you buy the parcel across the street? It's not our decision.
I wasn't asking.
No, you're not asking. I'm just saying in general, we can't say that. We have to accept the fact that this is the parcel that was purchased and how we work together. I don't want to see all these negative things. I am concerned about water runoff and power, and I'm still concerned that we could potentially see rate increases and things of that nature. But we can't change that. What we can change is how we enforce the codes within the city and making sure we're modernized and working together with our corporate partners, I guess you could say.
And I agree with that. You know, knowing what this company is, data mining, you know, on the internet, everyone can search everything. You know, you tend to see areas throughout the country that these data mining facilities were just placed, you know, without anyone's knowledge. People are now dealing with problems. You know, we're ahead of the game. You know, we've had the individuals here discussing the plan, knowing what it involves, and now it's up to us to put those pieces in place to protect what we can, the residents in that area. So, yes, Mr. Ray.
I'm going to add one thing, if I may, maybe a smidge off topic, but in terms of our zoning code, our zoning code was established in the late 1940s, around 1950, and it's really hard to take and make, this is why the zoning map looks like a rainbow exploded all over it, and there's colors everywhere. You know, you're taking over 100 years of city development and then trying to make sense of it, right? There was a major overhaul of the code in the 1970s, and we are well overdue for an overhaul or an update of our existing zoning code. That's going to cost some money. It's engaging a firm, creating a steering committee, working through the process. In 18 months, 2 years later, you have an updated zoning code. We have the same issue when we talk about things like storage units. Our code allows storage units in I-1, and we've seen these other areas of town, and there's another one pending over on the west side where, you know, you're looking at a commercial area, but the zoning considers storage units warehouses, therefore they should go in I-1. So we're rezoning, like we did at Kmart, we're rezoning these business parcels to industrial, which may be fine now, but 20, 30 years down the road, those could become factories. Those could become any other of the permitted uses in the I-1. I'm not a big fan of spot zoning. I don't think we should just accommodate every request and make that zoning fit. I think the code, I think we should make the code serve our people instead of people serving the code to some degree. So yes, we're looking at data centers now, storage units is a thing, and there's probably a handful of other things that we do need to modernize a little bit. But to Mr. Lewis's point, we do have to work within what we have, and that's where we are today.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Councilwoman Kramer. Just a couple comments or a couple questions and a comment. First of all, I'm going to thank the representative from BidTIR for coming and being willing to address council again and answer all the questions that we've had, some of them more than once. And just the willingness you're showing to trying to, you know, answer every question and concern that's come up. So I think I appreciate that you're willing to do that and you express interest in doing it going forward. So thank you very much for that. My question is, continue with that comment, is that, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit, that can we eliminate all of the possible negative effects of this to every resident in the area? Probably not, right? But our goal as a council is to make sure that everything is done within our laws and within our code, and that code is there to exist, or that code exists to protect our residents, the city of Massillon, not necessarily the residents of Perry Township, but the residents of the city of Massillon. That's who we're concerned about. So I just want to make that comment, and I think the discussion we've had regarding, you know, setting some actual numbers in the code for decibel levels and so forth is a great discussion, and then we definitely need to move forward with that. My question is, two questions. I know you touched on this in the 2 weeks ago, the light plan, the plan for light abatement. We didn't talk too much about that this evening. I don't know, is there much light abatement necessary, and do you have a plan for that? And my second question is regarding the warehouses you're building. What do you house in those? What is the plan for those?
I'll do the first one, we'll do the tag team. So the lighting, the intent right now is on the buildings, there'll be wall packs. And most codes, and I can't tell you whether City of Massillon has it, but I'll tell you the intent and it'll make sense to you. You know, is really to have zero trespass at the property lines. And so basically what happens is you'll do a photometric study to be required by most codes. And then you show this mapping that has zero trespass at the property line. And no, we're not really proposing any street lights. Really, all the illumination will be from wall packs that are on the side of the buildings.
So the light won't expand past the boundaries of your property.
Yeah, that's what they call zero trespass. And so yes, like I said, the neighbor doesn't want to have the light going on. I will mention that this is relevant to you, maybe a couple of the other comments is, there is a security fence around this entire property. It'll be chain linked on the industrial sides on the first entry side, but it will be a 10-foot high solid slat fence on the west side. Again, that's for noise, but that will also eliminate any light from trespassing onto that side.
Yeah, and then the second question, as far as the warehouses. So, when you've got these servers come in, before we unload them off of semis and so on, these will basically be dry storage warehouses. They will not house any kind of facilities, bathrooms, restrooms, anything like that. So we'll store equipment in there, possible wire, if we have to change wire, things like that. So just everyday consumables and the equipment before it's installed. That's what these warehouses would be.
All right, thank you.
Perfect.
That's all I have.
Any additional questions? Ms. Rankin?
Thank you, Councilman Kramer. Is there much e-waste that we would have to be concerned with?
We have no waste at all.
From your computers and your servers and things, there's no...
There's no, any kind of hazards that come off of these. You can work 24 hours a day around them. And back to the, real quick on the decibel levels, what OSHA states is that any facility that over an 8-hour regulates of normal operations, if you have over 85 decibel threshold, that you have to have a hearing protection program. So if we were under 80 decibels, you wouldn't be required by law to have a hearing protection program for your employees. However, we obviously have a hearing protection program because when you're directly in front of the miners at 0.0, you're at 92 decibels. No one's going to work in front of the decibels like that, when they're up and running. However, what the requirement is, they will have you put on an audiometric tester. They'll put them on a few employees, have them working in different sections, and they'll monitor them for 8 hours. That includes them going on break. That includes them, having their lunch, working directly in front, back, whatever. If you exceed the 85 decibel threshold, that's when you're required to have a hearing protection. We have them in all of our facilities. We have safety managers on site. We do audiometric testing every year for our employees to make sure that there's no threshold shifts and that they've got all the equipment that's required so that they don't have any kind of hearing long-term effects that way. And that's to protect the employees at that point.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Lombardi?
I just have a comment. When it comes to, we're looking at, we are the city of Massillon, and most of the residents are Perry Township residents and not in the city. I just want you all to think that you got to keep in the back of your mind while we're making this differentiation, that these people support the city of Massillon. Some have businesses in Massillon, they shop in Massillon, they contribute to Massillon fundraisers, things of that nature. So we can't discount them as non-city residents. We have to look at this as good neighbors, I do believe.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, Mr. Hanson.
Hi, thank you again. Also, I believe at the previous board meeting that we were at, or workshop that we were at, because we were here for there, the question was asked, well, what do we get from this? What's the benefit that Massillon actually gets from us coming in and building and doing employees and hiring and hiring local? So with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Robert Pena. He is our economic development for Bittier. So he's got a slide presentation that he'd like to share with you on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, and I'll be brief. Again, my name is Robert Pena, and I come from the economic development ranks from municipal and county government previously, prior to going into private business. So looking at it from both sides, the public and the private sector, then we certainly look at what the economic impact will be to the area. And first and foremost, after also listening to the Massillon Live over the weekend, I wanted to assure the council that from the previous statement to today's statement is that the company does intend to hire up to 70 new jobs. It's been said that only 30 of those might be or 27 or 24, and that's incorrect. If you look at what is intended to do, that those 70 new jobs will produce a total annual salary of just at about $3 million, with a 3 to 5 year impact exceeding into the $17 to $20 million of annual salaries that would be for the Massillon employees, Massillon resident employees. Also, That comes with a benefits package. I can't speak to the specifics of the benefits package, but I can assure you that in my research I have done, that Victor does provide a benefits package to its employees. In addition to that, it has been mentioned that the company would be making over $100 million investment into this project, and that is correct. In doing our research with the county appraisal and auditor's office, we've learned that what the tax rates are for the region, for the city of Massillon and the Tuslaw school district or school area, and the annual payment that the company will make to these districts is going to be close to $1 million, or rather about $1 million per year. Again, with a significant economic impact that will exceed that over time. And I think we're being very conservative in our calculations at this time. I'm very conservative in terms of those calculations at this time, and would likely exceed that again based on what we're currently learning within the community. Again, Paul has mentioned that Vidgear would be a contributor to the community in other forms, and as we've heard this evening, the company wants to continue being a neighbor, a good neighbor, not only to the citizens, but to the community and to the city. That being said, we have also begun to engage with Jobs Ohio to understand how the Jobs Ohio process works within the community, and to also understand what it's going to take to look at the candidates from the local area and take them through a training program in the local area so that we can recruit, whether it would be from the college or whether it would be from citizens that are already trained in computer technology or in the technologies that we're seeking to have, whether it's a computer technician, whether it's an electrician, whether it's somebody who's accustomed working with computer servers, and so on down the line. There's a series of employees, but again, for the record, it will be 70 jobs from the area. Vidgear will likely bring in 3-4 jobs that will be management and/or trainers. And Vidgear may also invite some of these individuals back to Rockville for them to see, experience, and understand what it's like to work in these facilities. But that would be part of the training program. And because I have begun to engage with Jobs Ohio, then I will likely work with Paul and the community in seeing that these training programs would unfold appropriately for the employees. Any questions?
So with that annual $3 million salary and 70 jobs, that's roughly $43,000 per employee, $43,000 annual salary. So are you,
yes,
on average, yes. So are you looking more towards like on-the-job training individuals versus computer technology engineers? Because that's going to be a big swing in salary when I look at, on average, $43,000.
Mm-hmm. Again, we're taking an average right now and presenting what the average is. Computer technology engineers versus an individual that's going to come in and train and learn. There's going to be a wide variety. There's going to be a range of that salary in there. Okay, there will be some that might be paid more in the 50s. There might be some that might be paid lower in the lower 40s. But I can assure you that because we are going to work through Jobs Ohio, Jobs Ohio also has a minimum that we're going to need to reach, plus 120% of that minimum. So we will be mandated by state, by Jobs Ohio, to ensure that we're going to meet that threshold of salary going forward. We will also likely be required to submit annual reports to them as well.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Thank you, Mr. Pena, Mr. Hanson, Mr. Noble, our Vidgear, and me. That's all I have for community development. If we've done with the others previous articles, all from community development, Mr. Lombardi.
Thank you, Councilwoman Creamer. I got this late, guys, but we do have one other thing to cover as committee of the whole. We have board appointees for Historic Preservation Commission. The mayor wants to appoint Mandy Ultima Stall, recommended by the Massillon Museum, term expiration of 12/31/25. Stormwater Review District, Mike Knight, term expiration 12/31/25. Dave Irwin, term expiration 12/31/25. Gary Miller, term expiration 12/31/25. Board of Health, Kathy Heidger, term expiration 12/31/27. Sonia Glick-Ulam, term expiration 12/31/25. Those two appointments were never approved by Massillon City Council, so I'm not clear as to whether he's asking us to approve those two or not, but we will be putting this on the agenda for Monday as well, under the committee law. Mr. Hurricane?
Thank you, Mr. Lombardi. I communicated with the mayor, and since I'm up here, I'll speak to that. All of those appointments are in the codified ordinances that they are appointed by the mayor and they are approved by city council. We went back and the law department actually gave an opinion on the two health department or health board members that were appointed but never approved by this body. So the mayor is bringing them forward for your formal approval, so they are actually in accordance with our code.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Hurricane.
Anytime, sir.
That's all I have. Anybody have any questions on that? We are adjourned, folks.